If you think about it, if you look at a lot of companies, it used to be you go to school and the best and the brightest would go and work for Bell Labs or some other place where you got to do a whole lot of R&D. Budget was unlimited. You just kind of go in and just kind of start thinking about stuff or whatever. People aren't really getting paid to do that anymore. And a lot of companies are not taking that money and investing it in R&D. And even people in this city, in this town, talk about that a lot, particularly in the Capitol building, that look, people are not doing that anymore. So what do we do? How do we become more innovative? Well, the innovation now rests in the hands of the entrepreneurs. And so if you talk to students, if you talk to young people, if you talk to older people, people who are experienced and perhaps have been laid off or been displaced, you'll find there's a lot of idea generation going on, and a lot of people who want to take that energy and move it in a certain direction. But what we're lacking right now is a process for getting those ideas out, getting those ideas developed. And so that's something that's clearly present and prevalent. When you look at startups and what kind of impact they're having on our country right now, I think I've seen reports of anywhere from 80% to 100% of all net new jobs are coming from startups. So as much as you may hear that IBM is hiring or whatever, then there's just as many companies that size that are laying off people in 10,000, groups of thousands or whatever. So startups are really driving the economy. Now, as we look at this a little bit more, we'll find that there's only certain types of startups that are driving the economy right now. And so when you look at the face of unemployment in this country, and you look at the people, the large number of people out there that are suffering right now or looking for opportunities, startups actually offer a solution for a lot of those people. The issue is, how do you get the ideas connected with the money, which is effectively the fuel, to make these things happen? So all of the stuff that we've heard about the startup revolution, startup economy, largely has been driven by people who don't look like the people in this room. So we're involved as consumers, not so much as producers. We are the ones that will put our money towards it, we'll purchase it, we will use it, we will tweet about it, we'll post it on Facebook, we'll do all of that stuff. But when it comes down to actually creating it, that's where we're not present. Some of us are there, we're working on it. Many of us just wish we knew how to do it. And there's no one that's really out here trying to help us do it in the right way. So a couple things that I wanted to cover, and you may have heard these stats before. It was interesting. Last night I was finishing up the presentation. I knew exactly what I was going to talk about. I was all set. I had practiced it. I was like, I'm good. I fell asleep. I woke up at like 5:45 this morning and realized that I had to throw it all away. And the reason was that I had read a report, and I've seen this. This has been quoted for like over a year and a half now. And I read it, last night again. I put it to bed. I'm like, I'm good. I know what I want to talk about. And I woke up and I could not get these two facts out of my mind. And the issue was that I think that there's been a misinterpretation of what this means, but everyone's been reporting it because it just sounds like a great thing to say. So, and most people have probably seen this from the standpoint of people say that 1% of startup founders are black. But if you look at the same study, you also find that the Latino category didn't really have its own category. They just threw it in the other. So it's probably a little bit more than 1%. It's definitely less than 2%. But here's the thing that no one really says. It's less than 2% of the funded startup founders are black or Latino. And that's an important distinction because most startups don't get funded. So I know a ton of people of color that are working on startups. I know a ton of them. And all of them, almost all of them, are in this boat of trying to get funding. So by the study says that basically you're not part of this equation or this math unless you've already gotten funding. But our problem is not so much about funding as much as it is getting people prepared so that they can be fundable. And so what does that number look like? So how many people are really involved in trying to make something happen? And therefore, because they're not making anything happen, it means that they may need some assistance, some correction, or some type of guidance to make this thing work. So that was one of the things that kept me up. Second part is this one. And this one gets misinterpreted too. all black teams receive half the funding of all white teams. And if you just look at the data they provide, you look in the middle, so I know some of you may not be able to see it, but on the left, the far left is the all-white bar. It says 2.3 million. And this is looking at your seed round and your average seed or Series A round of funding. And the all-black team says 1.3. And then if it's mixed, then it's 2.2. So the funny thing about this is I'm not sure I've ever seen data that would suggest that it's to your advantage to have a token white guy. It always works in reverse, right? So that's what this is saying. If you look at it on its surface, it would suggest that you have to have at least one white person, at least one white founder, in order to get the kind of money that supposedly you deserve. But that's not what this is saying. All black teams. So that means a startup made up of just African American founders, for example, or Latino founders. That's not what the startup game is about. It's not about putting together a team that looks like you physically. It's about putting together a team that complements you in every way possible, so that when you go before a VC, a potential investor, or even a customer, that they can look at you and they can tell from everything that you're saying and everything that you're representing that you know what you're doing, that you have the best team working on this big problem, and they can trust their money in your hands with the expectation that there's going to be a major return. So this doesn't tell the full story, but these are the facts that people tend to run with because they get all the press. So what we really have to do is we have to dig into why this is the way it is. What are the reasons that cause this type of phenomenon to take place? And then what do we do about it? So that's the question, right? So let me give you a little bit of insight into DreamIt, and then I'll get into details in a minute. So one of the things that we do at DreamIt is we work with startups. We work with very early stage companies, anywhere from someone who just has an idea on a napkin to someone who maybe you have a product out there and is getting a little bit of traction, but it hasn't started to scale. You haven't been able to take it to the next level. And so last year we did something very innovative in that we had a part of our program that was particularly focused on finding minority-led startups and putting them through the same program that everyone else goes through when they come through our accelerator. We'll talk about that later. Because we went out and looked for the startups, we got over 300 applications.